This would be a good time to ingest some extra caffeine. Late night adventures on the gridiron, and we all know anything can happen when you kick off after dark. BYU about to kick it off as we get this game started. He'll bring it back from inside his 5. Just never had a chance to shake loose, and he'll be brought down. So the Boise State Broncos offense will come out first. It's not often we focus on a matchup quite like this, but David, we have a couple of premier tight ends in this game.
And we've seen it recently, right? Ty Warren last year, Brock Bowers the year before. Like, you can build an offense around an elite tight end, and both of these schools do it. The speed, the playmaking ability, the versatility. Palmer, I bet you wish you had a guy like this you could throw to.
You're right, David. I played with a lot of NFL guys at tight end, but none of them were as dynamic as these two right here. And you're going to see them get the ball in a variety of ways. We're seeing offense.
Wide open spaces. They'll get the first down. It's spotted on the 49.
Nice completion here to this wide receiver, and you're going to see this receiver line up in different spots all over the field all game long. Defense has got to keep their eye on where this guy is because they know he's a big part of this offense's success.
That's the way to start a drive. Now they'll snap it just shy of midfield. Pulls and throws off the RPO. He is going nowhere. Stops at the line of scrimmage.
Defense came into this one prepared for these quick receiver screen passes. Nice job beating blocks at the point of attack and rallying to the football.
Pocket breaking down. And he got smacked just as he released the pass. It's incomplete.
Man, it's easy to play defense when you can do this. When you can get to the quarterback quick and make him make a decision quick, it makes it easier for the secondary, for the linebackers, for everybody on the field.
Looking to throw again. Shoots it to the left. Pass is incomplete, but a lot of contact there. I think it's going to be pass interference and a first down.
And the defender just way too handsy on that last play. You could see all the contact as the ball was in the air. He simply can't do it, and the referee's caught it.
The Broncos have it with a 1st and 10. Back to pass, it's Madsen. And the defense making a play, getting a hand on that pass.
Yeah, I don't know if the quarterback got confused on 1st down. He might have thought the defense was going to be in man coverage that time, but they were in zone. They fooled him and just didn't seem like he had his eyes in the right place, was forcing that ball to his intended target. The window way too small. The guy was not open, so...
There he goes. He was running through tackles and picked up the first down and finally got knocked down. And the Broncos are on the move. To the air on 1st down. And he was drilled just as he released the pass. It's incomplete.
And he was off target there, but I tell you what, I'll expect to see more of that. They do a really good job in this offense of getting the running back the football in the passing game. Just let him make plays, let him be a difference maker, ball getting to him in space. So I expect we'll see more of that throughout this game.
Picked off, and the opening drive is stopped with an interception.
That is the perfect start for a defense that has really struggled against the pass this season. They're in the bottom portion, okay? Have struggled, but opening drive, making a statement. Maybe this creates some momentum. Maybe this turns the tide for this defense.
He'll go out of bounds at the 22, methodically moving it away from their own end zone. The Cougars in a good spot here with second and short. Grab behind the line. It's Ryan. And maybe he'll get back to the line of scrimmage, but no more than that.
Nice job, defense. You always hear people talk about tackling the catch. You saw it right there. There was nowhere for that receiver to go once he had possession. As a result, no gain.
Pressure coming. And the Heat gets there. And they get him down at the 14-yard line. BYU will bring the punt team on the field. They'll boot it into the night sky for the first time. Really good job by the coverage team to make the stop, and that's where they'll put it in play. They'll start this drive 60 yards in front of them from their own 40. One back in the backfield, he gets the carry. And he was fortunate not to lose yardage on that play, able to wedge it back to the line of scrimmage.
Yeah, when you get penetration by that defense right away, and there's no way to cut at all for that back, he gets destroyed right away. No way that play was going to be successful. Way too much penetration.
Oh, he's going to try to get it all here. Picked off, and they ruin an early drive with the turnover. He can be dangerous with the ball in his hands, but no room to return that pick, and they'll go on offense from the 21. BYU has it back. The Cougars ready to get into that playbook. They didn't get much done the last time they had it, had to punt it away from deep in their own territory, hoping this drive will be more productive. He's brought down quickly, minimal gain there, still a bit short of the first down. Try to make up for some of that lost ground on second down. Running to Green. He's running free down the middle. He's at the 30. He's at the 10. And he just kept running, and he ran away from the crowd, and he'll take it in. Touchdown, Cougar! Setting up for the extra point after the first score of the game. That was a lightning-fast drive that ends with a touchdown.
If you can string a few more drives like that together, man, we might as well get our popcorn out because we're going to get a lot of scoring.
From inside the 10, here he comes. He was hoping for something a little more dynamic, but they get him on the ground at the 20. A lot of field in front of them as they open this possession from their own 20. Keeps it on the bootleg, looking to throw. Caught in the backfield, it's Sherrod. And this one will be stopped for no gain.
They're just trying to sneak the back out to the right side there, but great job tackling on defense against a guy who's hard to bring down once he has the ball in his hand.
Here's the handoff. And the defense holds firm. No pickup at all on that play.
Well, you live by the blitz, you die by the blitz. That time the defense called it at the perfect time. The linebacker able to make the stop on a short gain.
And from the offense's perspective, that's probably making a little something out of nothing. Crosses the 30. At the 40, there he goes. Works his way to the 41, and that is plenty to give him a first down. The Broncos come to the line with a fresh set of downs. To throw, it's Madsen. That's caught. It's Sherrod. Knocked out of bounds at the 46 after the good pickup on that one.
Running backs nowadays, they are wide receivers. I mean, you got to feature them in the pass game. Why? Because you get matchups on linebackers like this. Great job getting them the football near the line of scrimmage. Bam, break a tackle, make something happen, get 10-plus yards.
And he is snuffed out, greeted by a host of defenders. We've reached the break. BYU is on top. One period in the books, and let's take a look at the stats. Had a chance to talk it over during the break, and they'll start with second down. From the gun, to give, looking for room.
Really nice job by the defense that time, getting a stop. They've been really good so far in this one, shutting this guy down, not letting him break out. Got the lead. It's tight, though. and you know the opponent is going to keep trying to run it. So can you keep this up here in the second half on defense? That's the question.
That pass is well off target. He got hit as he was trying to throw, and they can't convert on third down. Quarterback may change this route. On fourth down, looking to pass. Fires it down the seam. And he throws another interception, his third of the night. Bust through behind his pad. And they capitalize not only on the pick, but on the great return to improve this field position. The BYU offense headed back out to go on the attack. Last drive went for 6. We'll see if they can do it again. Oh, they're after him. Just too much of a rush, and down goes the quarterback just behind the midfield stripe at the 49. And the Cougars with a long way to go after the loss on the last play. Dropping back, it's Retzlaff. They go to the wide receiver screen. Across the 25, he's got room. They get him stopped, but the big gain has them on the doorstep. Let's mark it at the 13. After ripping off a huge chunk of yardage, now they've got it 1st and 10 from the 13. He just got rid of that one to save the down, didn't see anything he liked.
It really doesn't matter how big a boy you are. You could be huge out there at wide receiver like that guy is. If you don't set your feet first, you're not going to be accurate with the throw. You can't make sure you give that wide receiver a chance to win a jump ball if you don't get those feet.
And he strides his way into the end zone. Touchdown, Cougars. That touchdown puts them up by at least 2 scores. Do you want me to say it's over? Probably, but boy, it's starting to feel that way.
It might not be over, but you're in trouble, and you better find some answers really, really quickly. This team is putting everything together, and right now you got nothing going. Come on, give me something.
Didn't find any crease in that kickoff coverage, and he'll be stopped at the 17. The Bronco offense back out there ready to give it another spin. This is when the pressure can ramp up a little bit on an offense, David, when they start feeling the heat to answer a score.
And I think being down 14, you can kind of feel that way. But, dude, if you put a good drive together, this is a 7-point game, so Palmer, no need to panic.
I was just going to say, David, I mean, this thing can flip quick. You go down, score, all of a sudden your defense gets a stop, or who knows, better yet, gets a turnover. This game is entirely different.
This offense has been sluggish, to say the least, but finally they're on the move on 1st and 10. Looking to throw on 1st down. Lets it fly. And that incomplete pass caused by the big hit on 1st down. 2nd down coming. What will they dial up on 2nd and a long way to go? It's complete to the left. It's a seam wide open. Found enough room to get it into enemy territory. They're down at the 43-yard line. 1st down for this offense. They just keep firing. Looking to buy time. Trying to make magic on the scramble. He gets it across the 40 and out of bounds at the 38. And the Broncos can really attack on this 2nd and short. They'll run play action. Dances away. Slings it downfield. Receiver wasn't ready for the throw. Incomplete. It is deafening in here. Soaked in noise as BYU tries to get a stop on 3rd down. Scanning the field, it's Madsen. Now improvising. Throws to the wideout. Got him downfield. They make the tackle, but he's got a fresh set of downs, and it's 1st and goal from the 7. After that huge gain, now a chance to cash it in from just outside the 5. A 1st down run in the red zone. And he's loose, and he'll take it to the house. Touchdown, Boise State.
This guy just has a nose for the end zone, and you love his ability to find creases, use his speed in the open field, and go score. He's been really good for his offense early this year. That already his 5th rushing touchdown on the season.
On the run from inside his own 5. Really disciplined job by the coverage unit to get down there and make the stop at the 19. This drive will start from the 19-yard line. He wastes no time and comes out throwing. Got his man in the middle. Nice gain on that play, but leaves it a little short of the first down. The Cougars can play this second down a lot of ways with just a few yards to go. Back to pass. Fires to the big fella. And he's got enough for the first down. They'll mark it at the 34. We've reached the 2-minute timeout, and they'll talk it over to see if they can build on this lead before halftime. Lining up from the 34 on first down. Rides the back on the option, the give. He is going nowhere. Stop at the line of scrimmage.
And this guy has been a dominant force early in this game. We're still in the first half. He already has a sack. He gets a tackle for loss there. He's playing so well with his eyes right now. He's reading his keys, and he's letting his God-given ability put him in the backfield to make these plays.
Now facing a 3rd and long. Dropping back, it's Retzlaff. Here's the pressure. Didn't have much of a choice, just had to throw that one away. It'll be 4th down. Looks as if BYU will have to punt it away. Great contact on that ball as it just hangs up in the sky. And the returner goes down.
I'm literally walking over to that guy. My man, thank you so much for saving my run. That could have been really, really bad. I could have been benched, but you got my back. Appreciate you, my man.
Not much running room there thanks to this senior defender.
I love this defense's ability to fight off blocks and rally to the football. They do such a great job pursuing that wide receiver screen to only allow a minimal gain and no first down.
Now he's going to break the pocket. He stopped at the 49 after gaining 10.
And both these quarterbacks, man, they're showing off their ability to take off and scramble and make plays. Right here, it's a design pass. He's looking to make a play. What does he do? He sees some space, captures it, makes the big play with his feet, gets another first down. This guy can do that a lot.
He's knocked out of bounds. They'll mark it at the 44. The Broncos with myriad options after that big pickup on first down. Second down, they'll go to the air. Looking to take a shot. And that's going to be incomplete. Going for broke on second down, but third down's coming up. And the Broncos come to the line on 3rd and short, hoping to keep the drive alive. They'll try to bully their way for the first. All down, but he has enough to move the chains. They'll put it in play from the 40 on 1st and 10. Looking downfield, it's Madsen. Floating away. On the run, deep down the right side. And the pass is incomplete, but the flag flies, and there was a lot of early contact there. Defense trying to be physical in pass coverage took it a little too far, and the offense will pick up the first down. One more play before the teams head to the locker rooms. Looking downfield on first down. Defense was swarming around this quarterback, and he never had a chance to get it off. And down he goes, and we will head to halftime. The Broncos will line up to kick off and start the second half. Looking for daylight from inside his 20. Probably needed to pick up an extra block or two, but as it is, he'll be stopped at the 28. Looking to throw on first down. Quickly complete. Good, solid pickup on that one. They've got it out to the 40, and it's first down. Fast completion, move the sticks in. Let's see if they try it again. Wants to throw on first down. Caught in the backfield, it's Hagan. They make the stop, but the sweet throwing catch is plenty to give them a first down. Offense working from the pistol. The give to the tailback. Can't get him to the ground. What a nice job by the defense to string it out, not give him any kind of alley, and knock him down for a loss. The Cougars have put themselves in dire straits after that last play. It's 2nd and a mile. Back to pass, it's Retzlaff. The quick out, and he'll run across the sidelines after the good gain. Receivers work tirelessly, tapping that toe along the sideline, and it just looks so natural for him.
Yeah, it can't just be pat and go all the time, right? Reese just jogging down the field, ball hits you right in stride. You got to be able to make awkward body catches and do it getting your feet in bounds. That was sweet.
He'll be stopped about 2 yards short of a first down. And they're running out the kicker to give it a try. Splits the uprights from 56, and he's got 3 on the board. Let's go to the studio now and check in with Kevin Connors. Kevin, what do you got?
Hey, guys, got a final score in a big CUSA matchup for you. Sam Houston was able to come away with the victory, but it was not the type of dominant win we've seen in Huntsville over the years. It's a win, but it honestly lacked any real style points. One game, I know, fellas, but it could be one to circle when we consider the big picture there in CUSA.
Yeah, how about that? Sounds as if they had a good ball game there. Kevin, thanks for the update. Right back to the air on 2nd and 10. Fires to the big fella. They make the stop, trying to pick up just a little bit at a time to get to that first down marker. 3rd down coming up, and the Cougar faithful are doing everything they can to help out this team. He gets those chains moving, gets it out to the 42-yard line. And the Broncos have it with a 1st and 10. Wants to adjust the pattern. Wants to go up top on first down. And just left that pass short. Not enough juice on that one.
I don't know about the decision that time by the quarterback. He may have been expecting man coverage, but that time the defense was in zone, and they did a really nice job closing the window. The intended target was not open, and that's why that one fell incomplete.
Steps out at the 34-yard line. Big pickup on that one in this offense within striking distance. Looking to throw, it's Madsen. Rushes on him. And this will be incomplete. A big hit there forces 2nd down. Couldn't make the connection last time. Let's see if they throw it again.
This offense hasn't been able to generate a lot of points in this one. Here in the 3rd quarter, you're seeing the defense and how much pride they take on being physical. It's not just stopping the run. Guys in the back end flying to the football in the air, getting hits on guys, that time on the receiver, knocking it loose.
They've moved to the 16. It's 1st and 10. Use the play fake. Now to throw. Pressure all over the quarterback, and down he goes at the 24. The Broncos want to crank the tempo.
Man, that is a big negative play for this defense, putting them in reverse, getting the quarterback on the ground, and they better get ready again. Look at this offense. They're right back on the ball, ready to snap it again.
How about getting the foot down on that throw for the big completion? Not a lot of ground to cover and not much to defend. A big 3rd down in the red zone. They'll try to pick it up on the ground. Absolutely nowhere to go as his defense makes a 3rd down stop. And they'll send out the field goal unit. And he'll try it from the right hash, and the angle shouldn't be. He gets a hand on it. That's a live ball, and the defense has it. Inside the 50. The 30. Running inside the 20. And he'll take it to the house. He got loose. Touchdown, BYU. They are seizing control and taking away hope as they push out the lead in this Week 8 showdown. And with the extra point, they now have a 3-possession lead at 17. Here's the return from inside his 10. Not a lot of space to be found. Good hustle by the coverage team, and they stop him at the 21. They love to put a long drive together here as they start from their own 21. Might be calling a hot route. Looking downfield, it's Madsen. It's complete on the right side. They bring him down, but the big play will move the sticks.
And that was a nice throw by the QB. When you see that drag route coming across the field, how about putting the ball right on his numbers? Not high, not low, where he has to stop his momentum. Right on the numbers where he can catch it, keep running, and chew up some yards after the catch.
Can't make the connection, and the defense putting on the heat and forcing the incompletion. Working well behind the sticks on second down. After the incompletion, back to the passing game. And the timing just a hair off. They had the big play to start the drive, but a couple of misfires now leaves us with 3rd and 10. From the gun, wants to pass. They get to him as he throws. This time on target. Nice job to pick up the first down, and they'll spot it at the 42. That's the end of the quarter, and BYU is on top. And as we switch ends of the field, let's take a quick look at the national rankings. They'll go back to work with a first down in the final period. Wants to throw again. Grabbed in the backfield. It's Sherrod. On the move at the 30. They make the stop, but he'll have enough yardage for a first down. Passing game kept this drive moving. Let's see if they try it again. To the air on first down. Under fire. Time running out, and he goes down at the 34. Looks as if we have an injury on that last play, and we'll take a break to check him out. And the Broncos now with a long way to go to pick up the first down. Now the play fake. Takes a hit as he fires. Missed receiver there. It's incomplete.
And it's just been that kind of day for this quarterback and this offense, guys. They have never been able to get into a rhythm throwing the football. Timing's been off. Accuracy hasn't been great. We've seen some drops. Just not in sync, and that's why they find themselves trailing by a lot right here late in the game.
On 3rd and long, hoping to throw beyond the sticks. Intercepted to stop the threat. Trying to take it back. And a big return after the INT sets up the offense for this possession.
And as a defensive lineman late in the game, man, when you know it's past, you're pinning your ears back, trying to get to the quarterback, and DBs are trying to do this. Pad them stats, get the INT. Nice job by this D.
Pulls it in. It's Hagan. And that play just looked to be a mess from the snap, and he's run out of bounds behind the line of scrimmage.
Hey, on offense, you got to know when the play is over. And that one there, nowhere to go with it after he caught the football. You start trying to juke guys. You start trying to run backward. This ain't high school anymore. And you used to be able to make that play years ago. You're not doing it here in big-time college football, though. Not good.
Really good defense. You know, you're trying to stay as close as you can to all these targets, and most importantly, those open field tackles and getting them on the ground as soon as they catch it. That's a major deal for defenses, and that was a good example there of it.
He's going to lose a yard on that one.
That's a nice job by this defense, getting in the backfield quick. They got in there so fast, anticipating pass on 3rd and long, but they reacted so well to the run, get the tackle for a loss, and now probably going to force the punt.
And the punt team gets down there and gets the return man on the ground. First play of the drive comes from the 41. Might be changing the route. Looking to pass. It's Madsen. Finds his man. It's Sherrod. Found enough room to get it into enemy territory. They're down at the 43-yard line. New set of downs after the completion. Looking to throw on first down. Fires downfield. A beautifully placed ball to the outside, and the toe drag for the big pickup. They're in the red zone. 1st and 10 from the 20. They're in the red zone, and they'll pass it. Lets it fly deep downfield. And he can't quite make the connection as he was trying to pay off this red zone opportunity. Clock is under 4 minutes as they come to the line for second down. Wants to go up top. This time he's got his man. Now the connection takes it to the 11.
And here comes money down for this offense. Third down execution is a premium. You work on it all week ad nauseum for these moments when you can execute when the field starts to shrink.
Looking to move the chains. They throw it complete to the left. They make the stop, but he got the one he needed and plenty more. It's first and goal. The Broncos pounded the rock to move the sticks. Now back to work. They'll try to get it in with the run. This has been happening all night. They stubbornly keep giving him the ball, and the defense is all over it. Running play to the left here, looking for the end zone. Relentless, tough running gets it down to the 4.
This has been really good for the defense, too. It's kind of a bend-don't-break mentality, right? Really bowing up with your backs against the wall. If you can win this next third down, try to force the opponent into a field.
And it's his 4th interception of the game. The 50. A dangerous cover man and a dangerous return man after the pick as he gets it all the way to the 44-yard line. BYU has it back. The Cougars ready to get into that playbook. They'll keep it on the ground. The clock is on their side. Turning it on. Really good job by everybody there. Well blocked, good run, and a first down. And the Cougars, after ripping off that huge run, let's see if they can do it again. They'll ride the hot hand. Stopped in the backfield. He's going to lose 3 yards on the play.
Well, there was just nowhere to go for the runner on that last play. Just way too much penetration up front, and as a result, they lose yardage.
The Cougars trying to find their way forward after the big loss on the last play. Motion from the wideout. From the gun, the running back has it. That is a big win for this defense as they were right there as soon as he got the ball.
How about that defense? In the backfield, nowhere to go right away. You could tell they were playing the run game all the way, and they got in the backfield and got the tackle for a loss.
The Cougars need their binoculars to find that line to gain here on third down. From the gun, he leaves it with the back. Oh, he's got some space. He's stopped right at the 29-yard line, and it'll be fourth down.
Well, it's a great individual effort by the running back on that last play. It's third and forever. He tried to get his team the first down, not enough. Let's see what they do on fourth.
Nothing like stomping a guy in the teeth when you got him down. They'll try to tack on 3 more. It is good. And that lead grows even bigger. You're going to hear guys after this game say, got to work harder, got to be more intense. You know, sometimes the harder you try, the worse it gets. And it seemed to me that's what happened out there today.
Yeah, just never really got into a rhythm for this team. There's no doubt they've got a lot of very talented players on both sides of the ball. So, David, I don't think this is a situation where they need to now freak out and try to reinvent things on either side of the football. Just being in better rhythm early and trying to find that in their next game, I think would go a long way.
Yeah, and it's just finding a couple of those plays. What do I do really, really well? Let's continue to build on that. Let's take away these negative plays. Let's take away these turnovers. How do we create more turnovers? I think that rhythm you're talking about, Jesse, finding those things that I do well, building on them, and doing more of them.
That will put the wrap on things from here. For David Pollack and Jesse Palmer, I'm Reese Davis. You've been watching another presentation of EA Sports College Football.